before we open up our material. So God, thank you that you're the designer of marriage. Thank you that you are gracious. I pray that each of us would grasp at what you want us to grasp. Thank you for loving us deeply. That has nothing to do with our behavior, but you initiated love towards us first. In Christ's name, amen. All right, we have a handout here, and for those of you that like structure, I'm really sorry. I struggle to stay on task, like exact points. Susan's better at that than I am. And so I hope this just give a little outline of what we're doing. And so the theme of today is power and control. So power and control. And for instance, anybody here ever been controlling in their marriage? Some of you didn't raise your hand.
And the rest of you are liars.
That's next week, telling the truth in your marriage. So for instance, if any of you have ever done silent treatment, that is a vie for control and power. Or anybody ever raised their voice? Or use sarcasm to avoid? No, not me. Of course not. Right? Those are all vies for different types of control and power. And what happens is we just respond quickly. And then anybody here ever fight over really small things? Like, why do we fight about that? I remember one conversation I fought with Carly over the exact time the clock on the car should say. No, that's not how it is. Yes, it is. It's my car. Right? That was really mature on my part. Right? So we do this thing. So one of the things I want to talk about that we're going to both talk about is this idea of how do we communicate when we feel powerless. When we feel powerless. So for instance, anybody here ever want to change their spouse lately? I just wish he would fill in the blank. Or why doesn't she just do the following? Right? We've all had those things if you live on earth. So part of this is what do we do when we feel powerless? Because when we feel powerless, we're actually really vulnerable to say stuff that hurts our spouse, to gain back the power. And so one of the scriptures I think of is Proverbs 18:10 that says this, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous man runs to it and is safe." One of the beliefs I have is powerlessness doesn't mean I'm hopeless. So I'll give an example of what I mean by this. I'll talk to a couple, or I'll talk to the wife sometimes, and she'll say the following, "I really want our marriage to get better, but he won't go to counseling." You know, hypothetically, that happens like once a year with me. That scenario happens. And so she thinks she's powerless to work on the marriage. But is she really powerless? Not at all. She's not powerless at all. But because she feels powerless, she sometimes feels hopeless. And that's really not the case. She's not hopeless at all. Because when she changes, it actually changes the whole marriage. And so we really want to focus on what to do when we feel powerless. The hard part is we just react in anger, frustration, and annoyance, and we don't even know that we're powerless. I know very few couples that go, "I feel powerless. Can we talk?" We don't talk like that. We feel powerless and we get defensive, or we raise our voice, or we say little jabs, or we go, "I'm going to go back on the screen and avoid you now because you don't get it," or all those type of things. So, Susan, what do you think more about feeling powerless in marriage?
I think that we tend to live reactively, so we need to keep in mind that 50% of any relationship is 100% you. You own the 100%. And so 100% of the way you respond or don't respond, 100% of what you do with the feelings of powerlessness is in your control. We tend, though, if we live reactively, to focus on if my partner's not doing something that I like or that I know how to control, then we're out of control. That's not true. Because as Dan was saying, if I react differently, do something different, do something surprising, it at least introduces a change into the system. And that doesn't mean that our partner necessarily will change, but you know how they say you keep doing the same thing in the same way, you're going to get the same outcome and that's crazy making. I say you have 100% control whether you do something in the same way, whether you get involved in the same pattern of conflict, whether in response to the fact that your spouse does something that's hurtful or that leaves you feeling the way that you do, that you cannot respond in a different way. You have a whole plethora of choices that have nothing to do with what they're doing.
So when you feel powerless, the truth is you still have options. So I'll make up a hypothetical scenario for maybe one of the couples in here. So let's say, hypothetically, there's a gentleman in this room that works too much. Okay, hypothetically, right? And in her mind, the wife in this scenario feels like she's a roommate and he's really married to his job. She feels powerless to change that, right? So, but really, she still has options. So like one of the options might be that she needs to work on her resentment, or she needs to have compassion for him because his identity is even more in his job than it is in Christ. Versus, I'm just mad at him, when is he going to get it? You know, all those type of things. So powerless, the feeling of that doesn't equal that I don't have any choices. So what I want you to do is go to the page 2 in your packet, and you're just going to take 30, 60 seconds. And I just wrote down about 20 ways, and there's more than this, obviously, 20 ways you might feel powerless in a marriage. All right? And try to think of yourself. Don't think of others when you read this. Take 60 seconds, and I want you to read this one page, and then we're going to talk some more. All right, you guys got that down? Some of you are like, thanks a lot now, I'm more powerless. Thank you. This is really thankful. It's a really helpful class. So you can see when we experience these things, we are actually more vulnerable to act in anger, resentment, isolation, or passivity. We don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to walk through some of these with Susan and just talk about how can you respond well, because every marriage has some of this stuff. Every marriage has some of this stuff going on. And so how about number 3, Susan? When my spouse seems absent, like kind of they're there but not there, or preoccupied, or they're really focused on Candy Crush too much, or TV and sports, or hypothetically other things, you're not really powerless, but what can you do that's God honoring in that moment? The third one.
Right. I think that we tend to expect that our partner will read us. I'm going to speak primarily from the female perspective, since that's the only one I got, okay?
Right.
So if my spouse is preoccupied, I have a choice that I used to make that was incredibly unhelpful, and that is to withdraw and to get cold. And then when he would say, might notice, not always, but would notice, and ask me what was wrong, I would say, nothing.
Does nothing mean nothing?
Never.
Okay, great.
And then he would know, because I was basically like in the waters of that the Titanic were in terms of the vibe I was giving off. He would know that there was a problem, and I would want him to pursue me and come after me to find out that I was upset and hurt because he was preoccupied and not paying attention.
So can I interrupt you,
Yes.
please? So are you saying you came across as upset, non-verbally,
Yes.
and your desire was for him to pursue you?
To notice
To notice you're upset.
and to say that would jostle him out of his preoccupation, and that he would come running to give me all of the attention I'd ever longed for. Now, what's the problem with that?
Huh. And did that ever work?
Never.
Okay.
So, I decided that because, and I've mentioned this before, my husband and no other men that I know of are fluent in the language of estrogen. They've never lived in a woman's body before. They don't know how a woman thinks. Therefore, I needed to interact rather than just assume that he should figure out that I was putting him on duty to pay attention to me. So, I feel like having a dialogue, going him to saying, what are you doing? What are you involved with? And to say, I'd really like some time talking with you. I did not discover this being direct and say, not attacking him, but telling him what I need increases the likelihood that he'll stop being preoccupied. Doesn't guarantee it, but at least it's me making a choice to do something to try to bridge the gap between me and my need for attention or conversation and his need to be preoccupied, rather than just let my resentment and walls grow. The way that I learned this was from, at the time, my 2-year-old. Because I was really good in the silent treatment and withdrawal and all that stuff. But I had a 2-year-old that was very expressive. He was talking in whole sentences just after he turned 1. And he would stand up in his bed from 1 till about the time he was 2. And if nobody was around, he would yell at me, "Mama, I have needs. I have needs, Mama." And I thought, how can you not pay attention to that? The kid's being upfront and telling me what he wants. And so I learned from him, duh, if he can do it, I can do it. Now, I may not need to be that dramatic, but I can go and speak my mind and say what I would like or make a request or make an invitation. That's much more effective.
So why would you say sometimes that's risky to do that?
Because you might not get what you want.
Right.
And at that point, you have to decide, am I going to let my partner determine how I'm going to be and who I'm going to be? Or am I going to remember who I belong to? And that God's on duty 100% of the time. And he will always give me the attention that I need if I turn to him. I can take my pain over being ignored from my partner to the Savior who is always on call and always available.
So how was it for you trying to say that with gentleness? Because I've seen some couples where she's like, when are you going to get it? When you express the desire to have your needs get met.
Well, part of it is stating it positively rather than negatively.
Sure.
Telling them, I would like
Sure.
this, or this would be helpful to me, rather than, I don't like when you do this, so stop doing that.
Right.
Stop playing your game, rather than, could I have a little of your time? Or, we haven't had the chance to chat today. I don't know a lot of men who don't have terror rise in their souls when you say, we need to talk, so I wouldn't advise that. But I would say, I would just like to chat about, something that happened today or share a little bit of my day or whatever would now be a good time.
I like actually that phrase for guys, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
I think most guys husbands, they want to help. They want to be of assistance, like, I want to help. And so I think that's a great phrase, but I think this goes both ways for both husbands and wife when one is asking for help. If it's ever said, and this is a two-way street with a little bit of a tone, or the voice is raised a little bit, here's what happens to the other person. They only hear the tone, they don't hear the words. So if you're asking for your needs to be met, or asking for help, or asking for support, but it's said with that tone of sarcasm, or annoyance, or all those things, your spouse actually hears the majority of your tone, they don't usually hear the words. So when we lack self-control with our tone, it actually makes it harder for our spouse to hear us. They just hear the tone.
And that's true physiologically too.
Yeah.
In our brain here, the back of our brain, the most immature part of our brain, the emotional center of our brain hears tone, not words. The front of our brain, the thinking part of our brain, hears words. So the first thing that hits the brain, though, is the tone. So if the tone feels threatening to your brain, then you're going to shut down and either flee, fight, or freeze before the words even hit your brain to be filtered through. So help yourself out, men and women. If I really want a message to be heard, my tone is the ticket.
So because of that, when our tone is calm, it's almost like an invitation to be heard. When it's not, it's really an invitation to spark that fight, flight, or freeze. And that's when arguments happen a lot of times, just with the tone. Okay, let's go to another one. Number 5. When I try to get help, it could be church-based stuff, counseling stuff, whatever it is. If but my spouse will not seek out help, and they feel powerless about that. What do you suggest?
Maybe they'll come to a class on communication. Okay, I would say that this happens often, and not always, but it's oftentimes that the husband is more hesitant to get counseling than the woman. Not always the case, but usually. And again, you have 100%, I mean, assuming that financially it's available and it's possible, or you have insurance or whatever, you get to make a decision whether you pursue counseling. Because if you bring change and perspective and a new dynamic into the relationship, either maybe your partner will notice the change and will want to talk more about, or maybe find out what this person is about. But either way, it can be more helpful to you for how to conduct yourself in your relationship, whether your partner ever gets any kind of assistance at all. So I think that we need to not wait and assume that when you take the step, I'll take the step, but rather, what can I do? We should always be asking individually, what can I do to benefit this relationship? What can I do to have a better attitude in this relationship? What can I do to further our intimacy? And that is reliant on the choices you make, not the choices 100% that your partner makes.
All right, let's go to another one. Number 16. My spouse is unwilling to admit faults with a certain issue. I think this happens a lot. I've said this before. I think we can have a third grade education on our own faults, and I have a master's degree in your faults. All right, I think that's just human nature. So you can feel powerless. I really wish they would stop spending so much, or wish they would be more self-control with their tone towards our kids, or whatever it is. What do you say? Because you can feel powerless in that moment. How would you respond to that?
Well, first I would want to remind myself.
Oh, to the battery back. Oh, I think we need a new battery. Okay, I'll jump on that one then while they're working on that. So this idea of my spouse is unwilling to admit faults, I think one of the best ways to respond to number 16 is model teachability about your own faults. Model teachability about your own faults. So let's say they have an issue of shopping too much, and your issue is you waste way too much time online. You tell yourself, I'm going to go on for 20 minutes, and 3 hours later, you're still doing the same thing. So part of it is you say to your spouse, it's a modeling. It's not out of manipulation. Let's be careful here. Can I just share with you one of my faults that needs changing that I want to start working on more? Right? Because again, you only have control of your stuff. You can't force somebody else to, I'm going to face my faults all of a sudden. What's your thoughts?
Just to kind of back up what he said, be what you want to see. If you want to see somebody humbly admit their own faults, be willing to talk about their blind spots, then be that person. And then at least you'll be doing the right thing, and it might be more of an invitation for your spouse to do the same thing. But also show your partner grace, because we all have them. We all have those areas that we are heavily defended, where our inner kingdom is surrounded by a moat and a wall. And so focusing on how I can get rid of my partners is not the most effective means to relate. It's more, how can I deal with mine? And how can I show him or her a better way, a more gracious way?
One more suggestion for this one is to say the following to your spouse. I want the freedom to speak more freely into you without you feeling judged. And we talked about this a little bit last week, is if someone feels judged, they go to defensive mode and they don't really hear it. So part of that is that there has to be a culture of care and safety and lack of reactivity. Of say, I would love to speak into this and maybe even share with you how it's affecting me. But I don't want to do it in a way that makes you feel judged or less than. That's not my goal. No, notice it takes a lot of self-control to talk like that. And don't do it at 11:45 at night. Don't do it 3 minutes before you're walking into church, or don't do it as you're bringing in your taxes on April 15th. Okay? So you're a tax person, right? So timing with these conversations is really, really significant that sometimes we minimize, but timing is so essential. I like what Susan earlier, just the phrase of, is this a good time? No one likes to feel controlled. This is how my wife will do it sometimes with me. She'll say the following: we need to talk about this issue with our kids, or what a delicate issue maybe in our family, extended family, something going on. When is a good time this weekend to talk? And I go, okay, no problem, we can do that. But nobody likes that we need to talk right this minute. It just puts a defensive posture versus having the freedom to go, oh yeah, Saturday afternoon, that'd probably be good. And then she knows it's going to be addressed. I don't feel controlled, and we go into it in a better, safer place, and we're not as reactive. All right, so we're going to keep going, talking about powerless. But number 2, that was all under point 1 of your first page, actually. A few things to think about. So number 2 on your page, the power of our words. The power of our words. Our words have so much influence, even more than we realize. I think we can underestimate the power of our words. You want to jump in on that?
Yeah. As we talked about last week, the verse in Proverbs 18 that says death and life are in the power of the tongue. Basically what that means is that we never speak a neutral word in our whole life. All of our words have a direction in one way or another. If they're words that are moving in a life-giving direction, they're refreshing, they're encouraging, they're loving, they promote unity, and they're hopeful. But if our words are moving in a death direction, they'll be words of anger or malice, manipulations, division, condemnation sometimes. So our words, of course, have power for great good, but also for great pain. Also, the fact is that the natural tendency of the human heart is to employ words to get what we want. There's just no escaping the message of Scripture. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Word problems are heart problems. The direction that my words are going to go are going to be based on what the condition of my heart is. And there is a consistency between what is in my heart and what comes out of my mouth. And so we need to be aware of that so that we can struggle with that and know what really is ruling our heart. Because whatever rules our heart is going to control our words. And we want to be aware of that. The way I think that we need to, one of the things I think that just practically speaking, that indicates that we need to do is to think more and speak less. Think more about what you say and what the impact it will have. Ask yourself the question, what's the purpose of what I'm about to say? And then speak less. Proverbs 10:19 says, when words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is seen as wise. One of my favorite movies is the movie Ever After. It's a Cinderella story. And my favorite line in that movie is, I will not speak unless it is to improve the silence. I love that because the idea is, it gives me a grid through which to filter what I'm going to say. If it's going to improve the silence, then I'll speak up. If not, better to remain quiet. Not withdrawn and like the silent treatment, but silent without putting words that could be harmful into the situation.
Proverbs 16:21 says this, the wise of heart is called discerning, and sweetness of speech increases its persuasiveness. In that sense, what happens is if we want to influence our spouse in certain ways, it starts with our tone. So sometimes, anybody here when you're persuasive, you become a little louder, speak a little quicker, all that type of stuff. So the quicker we go, actually the less influence our words will have. So it says this, the sweetness of speech increases persuasiveness. This idea of we want to influence in a good way, we really have to slow down and watch how we go about doing that. On the opposite, and on kind of honestly the negative end of this, is Proverbs 12:18, and it actually, to me, is a verse that talks about the seriousness of our words, and really, I think, affirming the concept of verbal abuse. when words are really harmful. And Proverbs 12:18 says this, "There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." In essence, when we are rash with our words, it actually could be, the word rash could be translated just thoughtless. So anybody ever here do the whole, I spoke before I thought? That whole thing like, ooh, I probably should have thought before that came out of my mouth. That's what's intended by rash. It doesn't say explosive, it just says rash. A little bit harsh and thoughtless. So it equates that with a sword thrust. So it doesn't say, there is one whose rash words are like a little annoying pain. It actually uses sword thrust. And how long does it take to recover from a sword thrust? What? A lifetime, right? Some of the men and women in the military who've had, I would say, extremely life-threatening injuries as a result of that, there might be scars for life of the impact of words. So one of the worst things you can say, and I think guys have a tendency to think this way, so once in a while, is they'll say this, "When are you going to get over that?" I don't know if any guys ever thought that.
And 0 in the chance of never does that work.
Yeah, I've just never heard a wife do the following. "I just did." That will never happen.
Thank you, honey, for that wise suggestion.
Yes. Yes, what she hears in that moment is, "You don't care about my pain." That's what she hears. Or, "You're going to minimize my pain." So when we say the phrases, "When are you going to get over that?" That was 6 years ago and you brought it up again. By the way, I don't encourage bringing up old history like that. That's another whole talk. But when stuff comes to the surface, the idea of getting over it actually makes it worse. It's like literally throwing fuel on a fire. So this idea that recovery takes a long time. So we might say something rash or thoughtless, and then we want our spouse to be over it by the end of the day or the next hour. And that actually just perpetuates the problem because it doesn't provide any sense of healing. So for instance, someone that does gets hurt some way by a sword or a car accident, all the steps they have to go through, Henry Mayo, they go to the ER room, and all the healing, for someone to have healing from rash words takes a long time, and to actually takes a safe, healing, loving environment. No nurse in our Henry Mayo hospital, my wife works for Henry Mayo, so says, "When you get over it, you were injured, 20 minutes ago, we gave you medication, you should get over it." Right? They nurse them what? Back to what? Health. So sometimes we actually have to love them back to feeling safe instead of, "Oh, really? That still bothers you?" Right? Those type of things just make it worse. Now, the end of that verse says, "But the tongue of the wise brings healing." So here's a phrase or a conversation I wish most couples could have. It's the following. When you are struggling with something that has hurt you in the past, how do you want me to support you? When you are struggling from something that hurt you in the past, how do you want me to support you? Because it's gonna be a little different by the person, the personality, male, female, what type of thing it is. So for instance, I see this a lot at holidays. Anybody here ever have dysfunction with extended family? Ever? No, none of you. Wow, this is impressive. So what happens is people get stressed out and they end up taking it out on their spouse the day before Christmas, hypothetically. And then the spouse takes it personal. And then they lash out and make it worse. And then they minimize, "Well, your mom's always like that. Why are you still getting upset all these years?" And she doesn't respond in love. "Thanks for supporting me." She lashes out, and then it's a fight, and there's not a sense of healing. There's this sense of annoyance that I have to put up with your attitude. You want to add anything to holidays? Okay. Let's go to then number 3.
Before we do,
Oh,
I
great.
do want to add
2.
one more principle, just like we talked about words having direction. Something else that words have is weight. So I want to give you a guideline of how to filter your words. And it's about, it's called the sheep versus the camel guideline. And here's what I mean. The way that we talk to people will either carry their loads or add to them. It's helpful to remember that in the Bible, we are described as sheep. Sheep are weak, they're sensitive, and they're often scared. We need to be mindful to talk to one another in ways that will not make us more weak and more scared. People are sheep, not camels. A camel's job is to carry your junk for you. The Pharisees spoke to people as though they were camels. They attacked them. They burdened the people that they were in leadership over. And Jesus said of them in Matthew 23, they tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. What does Jesus say about himself, though? My yoke is easy, my burden is light. That's the kind of word that you want to deliver. Remember that we can speak words to them as though they were sheep and free each other, not weigh somebody down. Doesn't mean you can't speak a hard truth, but at the same time, we need to use care in knowing when to speak heavy things to people who are already carrying so much in life. One of my favorite people said, so many people are privately drowning. Stop handing out bricks. And that's what we do. So let's approach people as a sheep rather than a camel.
So I think one of the ways this looks, it's not always the obnoxious yelling. It could be the following phrase: why don't you just? Right? There's actually a sense of shaming in that phrase. Why don't you just?
Because it carries the message of, why are you making it such a big deal? Because if you just do this,
Right.
it'll take care of it.
Or in essence, you're a little bit incompetent and I am not.
Yes.
And now you're supposed to jump when I say jump.
Yeah.
Right. So it can be in really big ways, but it can be really also in really small ways. So what happens is sometimes there might be an area that you don't really struggle with. It's not a big deal, but it's simple. You can, whatever that is, and then it might be a different area that your spouse really struggles in. So because it's easy for you, it should be easy for who? Them. And so that's a way to add to that load on our spouse. And then we wonder why they put their walls up, or wonder why sometimes they're not wanting to engage very much because of those things that happen in conversations. Okay, number 3, what is being controlling or being passive in relationships? Being controlling or being passive? You want to jump into this one first?
Sure. First of all, let me just say, of course, that the human desire for control is part of our fallen nature. Ever since Genesis 3, the first couple rejected God's control and said, we think we might have a better way of going about that. And then they were joined by all kinds of people throughout the rest of Scripture. Couples, brothers and sisters, family members were all out to gain control. The disciples wanting to one-up each other, have the closer seat to Jesus. We all want to control our situation. And so I think that one of the reasons that we seek control is because it gives us a sense of safety and self-preservation. Because if I put myself in a position where I'm not in control of my circumstances, I feel like I'm giving people more power to hurt me. And I don't want to do that. That feels too vulnerable. The Bible has a lot to say about control. It says that God is in control. But a lot of times, I will wrestle with him for that position. And I certainly don't want someone else in my life to be in control over me. So I will seek to find ways to leverage my power so that at least I feel in control.
So one of the things I see sometimes is we want intimacy without vulnerability. I want us to be close and not have any walls and to be able to have these good conversations, but I don't want to feel vulnerable. And obviously that never works. And so vulnerability requires risk, right? So I've never heard someone say the following: I was kind of passive in my marriage and we got closer. I mean, it sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud like that. So part of this is growth will always require some level of risk. But a lot of times we want the outcomes without risk. I heard someone say this: every marriage is either moving toward intimacy or toward self-protection. So every marriage is either moving towards intimacy or towards self-protection. So why don't you jump to page 3 in your little handout, and just take, again, another minute, 30, 60 seconds, and read this page, Am I Controlling? And please don't think of your spouse when you read this. That will not help our evening go better. Just think of yourself. Take 30 seconds, read through some signs of am I controlling, and then we'll talk some more. So I'm going to just talk about the first one. So some of you are like, thanks a lot, I'm more controlling than I realized. This has been a helpful class. Thank you. This idea that outside the routine is not comfortable for me, so thus I should never do it. So for instance, let's say some of you are really routine people in the evening and all that, and then one of you tonight says, hey, we still have a half hour, we have a little time, let's just randomly do coffee at a coffee shop we've never been to before. Some of you, if you said that, your spouse would look at you like this. We don't do that. What's wrong? Do we have a new relative that works there? Right? Because, so this idea, what happens is this idea there's no spontaneity. I'm not saying you always have to be spontaneous all the time. That's not at all what I'm saying. But this idea that I can only be okay if we're in a routine. Right? So it actually is almost kind of, sometimes we can squelch fun. I've talked to a lot of couples and I'll say, how do you guys have fun together? And they look at me and they're like, well, 7 years ago before kids, right? And so there is an aspect that fun is just a healthy part of couple life, and this idea can squelch that idea of having fun once in a while as a couple. All right, let's look at another one. You want to add anything to that one? Okay, let's jump down to about the 5th one down. It says, you want things done a specific way. I'm going to let you talk about that one.
Right. Anybody here have any pet peeves? Okay. Or give me an example. What's a pet peeve that somebody has? What? Okay. Hating assumptions. Or a pet peeve about way things should be done. There you go. Loading the dishwasher.
The right way.
Else? Yeah. Yeah. That is in Ezekiel 89:14. That holy people load the dishwasher the way I do. Okay. We tend to be vulnerable to elevating our preferences to moral standards and then judge other people according to that standard. It is not your job or my job, to be the sheriff in your relationship about the way that your partner does things. Do you remember the old TV show Bewitched? There was a lady, the next door neighbor, who knew that there were strange going-ons at the person's house, and her name was Gladys Kravitz. And she would always peek out the window and always look at what the bewitched lady was doing and always report to her husband. She was like a moral busybody. Always saying, they're doing it again, Elmer. You know, they're doing this or that, or we need to do something about this. And so we need to be careful that we're not setting the standard for the way people do things that really are about preference and difference. And that our way is not the only way, because it takes a tremendous amount of ego to believe that you're qualified to renovate another person's preferences and actions. And so the problem isn't the way your partner does it. It's your assumption that you should have the power and control to renovate the way they do that. I'd also like to talk, unless you want to make a
So
comment.
I'll give an example in my own marriage. So my wife has a different opinion about washing cars than I do. We came from different backgrounds. Okay? And again, we can turn it into a moral thing. And so, for instance, so her dad, some of you actually even know him, had a auto mechanic store growing up and loved old cars. And his truck, he at times would wash it a few times a week. And I really don't have that preference. So, especially earlier on in our marriage, we would be talking, and she's like, it's been like 10 days since the car was washed. 10 days? I can go 10 weeks. Right? Or whatever it is. And so we honestly could be tempted to be judgmental towards each other. I could say, I think that's kind of not a really good steward of your time. All that didn't help. And then she would say something like, well, you need to be a good steward of the things God gave you. And we turned it into a moral thing, which thus led to more distance in the marriage, when really it's not a moral thing at all, but we can turn those things into moral things. And that's how people often feel judged, is our preferences become our morality. And I think that happens in Christian circles unintentionally sometimes.
Let's move on to talk for a minute about the one you seek to be helpful by frequently offering unsolicited feedback, suggestions, and advice. Oh, you have a question for Stan?
Yeah, please.
I think sometimes what will happen is if it's not necessarily moral, but if you don't acquiesce to my preference, you're not showing love. And
Right.
showing love
Yes. If you really love me, you would actually conform to my way. And sometimes we don't give our spouses freedom to do it their way without taking it personal. We assign all this a meaning to it. If you really loved me, you would be okay with every 10 weeks. Or the other way, if you really loved me, you would watch it as much as my dad did when I was growing up.
Because it becomes a circular argument. Which
Yes.
one's preference is going to be the loving one?
Yep.
Both. So it just goes round and around. Well, you're more loving to me if you do it my way. Well, no, you're more loving to me. The only competition in the whole New Testament is outdo one another in showing honor to one another in Hebrews 2, I believe. So that means I'm going to show my preference. We're supposed to outdo one another. I'm going to give you your preference more often than you give me mine. And I'm not saying it's really a competition, but in a way, rather than saying, well, when are you going to do my preference? And you should prefer me over my idea over yours. It's more like, how can I give you to the point that I'm sacrificially loving you, your preference?
And I'm going to take it really personal if you don't do it my way.
Right.
Right, I think that can happen. Yep.
Okay, I want to talk about the helpful thing. And there's another one a little bit further down, and I'm going to, right up front, I'm going to characterize people, so forgive me. And it's more anecdotally and experientially. I'm not saying it's true in all cases of men or all cases of women. But the way this helpful thing shows up is in two different ways. Generally speaking, one way more typically for women, one way more typically for men. First of all, for women, this shows up as the I was just trying to help syndrome. For a lot of us women, when it comes to our husbands, we have this idea in our heads that goes, I know better than he does, and I want to help him to do it right. Now, the background music of that is, kind of a little bit of an air of superiority, but we feel qualified to instruct our husbands on how to vacuum the carpet. I'm just going to name some things I felt the freedom to do. Talk to the children, negotiate for a raise, all the while telling myself that I was just helping. And so for years, I believed that if my husband would just take my help, our life would be so much better and our intimacy and romance would be so much greater. And I didn't really acknowledge it as being controlling. And I thought I was being generous because the best part about it all is that I was giving him all of this help and advice, and he didn't even have to ask me for it. I was just freely offering of the goodness of my heart. And I said these kind of things in my capacity as his Holy Spirit in training and best wife in the world. And I heard one day this quote from Anne Lamott, who said, "Help is the sunny side of control." When help is more about me and what I want the person to do in return, it's not actually help, it's manipulation. It's expectation and it's control. And so I learned to control by offering help. It is not uncommon for people who have experienced any kind of trauma to respond with that need for control, and I certainly fit that bill. As a 5-year-old, I was sexually preyed upon by a neighbor, and I did not have the ego strength at the time, or the words at the time, to do anything about it, so I just buried it in shame. Now, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, so I decided, because I didn't go to my parents, as I could have, they were great parents, that I would find a way to make my world work, because I had been in a very out-of-control situation and had felt entirely helpless. So in my 5-year-old wisdom, I developed a way to control the emotional chaos that I was feeling. And I decided if I controlled everything, that I'd never be caught off guard again. That's a pretty hefty demand to fulfill for a 5-year-old, but I worked hard at it. And so years ago, I kind of gave myself this imaginary clipboard. And I kept all the track of my caseload of all the people and things in my life that I cared about. And I was managing the caseload of how I was going to help them and how I was going to help them help me in a way that I could tolerate life. I put myself in charge of changing people, fixing people, burnishing the world. I gave myself that job. And I came up with all these good ideas for other people. I was almost 40 years old before I realized that everybody has their own emotional acre that God gives them. And I get to do with it, and you get to do with it what you choose. And we get to spend this short, precious life stewarding our life to God's glory, rather than having to take care of everybody else's. I thought that I could and that I had to help everybody else tend their acre. And it didn't make me happy, it just made me exhausted. And so about 25 years ago, I realized that I had taken on God's duties in his role. And even though I felt like I'm so close to getting it right, I gave up the caseload of being world office manager and gave away my clipboard. Sometimes I still find myself wrestling with God to take it back, to try to pick it up again. But I remind myself that phrase that's been out for the last couple of years, and if I wanted a tattoo, this would be a good one. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I've got my own little zoo of issues in my heart and my own acre to work on within that zoo, and I don't need to be working on somebody else's. And the most helpful people I know, they wait until they're asked, and then they offer what they can. They also tell me that, when you don't know what to do, that you don't have to have the skills required to come up with an answer. So sometimes I choose not to help because I know it's not coming from a good motive. And it's me trying to wrestle control again. So I also have learned to push myself to be willing to receive help, not just offer it, that I don't need to be queen of the world. And I think that's a really good thing to remember for both of us. So women oftentimes approach the help from control from the helping side. Gentlemen, if I may, I think that the way that it looks in your particular neck of the woods is more through instruction and advice. In terms of approaching people, well, let me show you how to do it, or what you need to do is offering instruction. Consider the times that you shared your opinions with others, not because they asked you to, but because you thought they needed it. Has it ever ended well? Either they weren't ready for it, or they felt like you were intruding or butting in. They probably felt defensive and maybe felt inadequate. When I think people are wrong, even if I think they're flat out wrong, why would I appoint myself sheriff to straighten them out? Burning down other people's opinions doesn't make you right, it just makes you an arsonist. So I don't need to offer you help and tell you how to do it or what you need to think or what opinion you need to have. And so I think that we want to keep those things in mind and recognize that just because controlling doesn't look like always the yelling person, that it still can be something that we're doing in a more subtle but still wrong way.
So I really think unsolicited advice often is like handing your spouse a cup of being judged. And I think it's unintended. So again, I know this is a little stereotypical, but the wife will say, I just want him to what? Listen. I wish he would listen. And he goes, I'm trying to be helpful. She just needs to tell her boss to knock it off. And so often, we make assumptions on how they need help. One of the themes you'll hear about in these 8 weeks is a culture of curiosity. And so when I go home and my wife shares something about her day or the kids or her job, I'll say, what can I do that's supportive for you right now, in the moment? Is it listen? Is it you'd rather have me end this conversation and do the dishes before I go to bed? You want some thoughts? And a majority of the time it's what? Listen. There's a few times it's not, but I would say a majority of the time it's listen. So a helpful question is, how can I be supportive of you in this moment? Again, it's so easy to assume, well, I can fix this problem in 2.3 minutes. And really that goes really, really well. And so I would say, though too, for guys in this idea, I would say one of the things that we can really work on is being present and listening really well, even if we're tired. I think that conveys a lot of care, of caring about the things she cares about. So one of the things I think we have to work on, this is for husbands and wives in regards to this issue, is I want to care about everything you say, not because of it's interesting, but because it's coming from you. Okay, my wife's a labor and delivery nurse. Honestly, I don't care about the details of every birth. Whether someone gets a C-section, how it went.
That's a deficit in your character, Dan. We
Right.
need to work on that.
I guess I don't love women as much as I should. To go, wow. But because of who's saying it. It's my wife, the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, is saying it. I have interest in the details of what she's talking about. A couple other things in regards to the controlling. You get stuck in all or nothing thinking. You only see one right way to do something or one way to be successful. You want to add to that one?
One way to be successful?
The all or nothing thinking?
Well, you go ahead. And then
Okay, I'll jump to that one. So part of this is this, if it doesn't go as planned, it's a failure. Or this is the only way we could deal with our money. Right? It has to be either or, and this idea that if it's either or, there's no gray. So whenever there's no gray, there's more chances for problems. And so sometimes we can do this one way or not. And some of us struggle with guilt and shame. And so if I don't do something really well, I see this a lot with like moms, young moms. If I don't do something, I'm a failure as a mom, just because I didn't do this one thing. And so this all or nothing can really add detriment to the marriage.
This also goes along with something that's really common, and I know I practiced it and I see it in my practice. And again, I'm going to address the women. As your husband interacts with your kids, I think that a lot of times as we think that we should be the one to determine the guidelines, because oftentimes the woman is the one who spends more time with them and can seek to control the relationship that you have with them, or that the way things that you would do with them. Like I'll have women say, you're being too rough, when rough housing is something, although that you may not do, that if your husband does, that's not a moral issue. But you think, well, but that will create a problem. You don't want to act that way. But so when you respect somebody, you work at building a partnership. When it has to go your way, or you get perturbed when things don't go your way, it can communicate that you don't think your partner's position is worthy of consideration, and that it shouldn't hold any weight or power. So I remember having a fight once with my husband when I told him to get some things at the grocery store, and I just put like green beans or something like that, and he didn't get the exact brand and kind that I wanted.
This happens to me all the time.
And I realized that I was all or nothing in him, thinking he should do it exactly the way I did. And I was the determiner of what the best green beans on the planet were. And if he did not get that, then the green beans are not worthy of being eaten. Or they'll hurt us. It's little things like that we get all or nothing, and we tend to catastrophize and think the worst about things that really shouldn't be given any emotional energy whatsoever.
So it's almost this idea of being right gets in the way of being close.
Yep.
Right? I'd rather be right, or I'd rather be close, depending on the issue. My wife and I have had many conversations about what is classified as matching for our kids. I'm like, what's wrong with purple flip-flops and green shorts at church? Oh. Right? So we have these different definitions. So one of the things to think about, and I would actually even say a prayer for yourself. God, help me show great respect when there are great differences. God, help me show great respect when there are great differences. And again, it can be the smallest things like matching clothes, but bigger things of we want to go buy a house or a career change, the big things that we might have a different opinion about. Okay, we're going to keep going. Number 4, learning to be slow to respond versus being reactionary. We're going to skip the passivity because you guys don't have that. Proverbs 15:28, it says, the heart of the righteous weighs, or another translation says ponders its answers, or how to answer. So the more delicate the conversation, the slower you're supposed to talk, because you're pondering. When you ponder something, it really means you go slower. There's a pause. So the more delicate issue, if you're talking about parenting differences or financial challenges, or you feel like someone didn't follow through for you and they didn't meet your expectations, those are the times you're supposed to talk the slowest, because you're pondering how to answer. But what happens is usually the opposite. We're upset, our feelings are hurt, we do the silent treatment, or we react really quickly and we start talking even faster because we're upset. And then what happens is we overwhelm the person and make it harder for them to communicate back with us. So again, the more delicate issue, the slower we have to communicate.
Another principle that I want to introduce, just in terms of how to think in that situation when you're all primed, when you recognize that things are going wrong in a conversation, or even in your own thoughts about what you're thinking about what your spouse is saying, I want you to say this mantra to yourself: stop the train. What I mean by that is, it refers to the train of thoughts. We can't stop thinking about something without replacing it with somebody else, but we still have to give ourselves the mental instruction to stop the train. Some of us have this thing where in our imaginations, we imagine or assume or think ahead about what our partner is saying to us. And then our thoughts go completely wild. We go off on a wild tangent. They may not be aware of it, but that's where we're going in our mind. And even when it's not with my partner, anybody here have a struggle with overthinking things? Oh, okay. I'm glad I'm not alone. if I feel overlooked at times, depending on how emotionally vulnerable I am, or that, or rejected, or anything like that, my thoughts have a vulnerability to kind of careen out of control. And I imagine all the possibilities. Do they not like me? Did I do something wrong? What's wrong with me? What should I do? And I use all my emotional energy trying to figure out a problem. And, or with my husband, if he says, well, I would rather not do that, I want to do this, it's like, well, I think to myself, what was wrong with my idea? Is he not being sensitive? Does he not care enough? I can go that way. So, I need to tell myself, stop the train and replace those thoughts with something else. Again, as I said earlier, reminding myself who I am and whose I am. Whether Alex or any of my friends in the world, and I've got great ones, love me, hate me, reject me, want me, don't want me, it does not change the truth that I am the beloved of Christ, and I am always accepted and welcome in his presence, and that he is always present with me. So I try to think those thoughts to stop the train of running out of control and then responding or reacting poorly to my husband.
All right, number 5. What am I attached or getting, or what am I proving? This idea of self-examination. One of the things I've been studying in Scripture lately and just thinking about this is, who in my life am I an advocate for? Am I an advocate for my spirit, for my spouse's growth as a human being? So if my husband is really good with his hands, how am I more of an advocate for that? If my wife is really nurturing and really good with a certain skill, how am I an advocate for that? How am I an advocate for my spouse's spiritual growth? Because great marriages don't just put up with each other, they're really advocates for each other's well-being. And that's what they're thinking. They sometimes will think of, I wonder how I can encourage that one gift in him or her. That advocate. I mean, the Bible even talks about in John 14:50, the original advocate, the Holy Spirit, is an advocate for us. Right? And that's permanent. And that doesn't have any flaws in that advocacy. And so part of this is I say a prayer, God, how can I grow in being an advocate for my spouse and their well-being and their future? And God, help me think there. Help me go there instead of being quick to maybe take it personal or kind of just hide behind my work sometimes or whatever it is. Help me be an advocate for what they need to grow as a human being.
I want to talk about the FACE yourself, facing yourself. 4 questions, and there's a word behind each of them. The first one is, what am I afraid of? So the F is fear. Usually when control rears its ugly head, fear's present, and you want to be aware of what it is. Secondly, what am I attached to getting or proving? That's attachment, is the A. Are you trying to, and some things that would go along with that. Okay, what am I attached to? Am I attached to trying to prove a point or improving my relationship? Am I attached to proving myself right? If so, at whose expense? But when you win, do you really help the relationship? Is it great if you win in an argument or a disagreement to prove the person that you say you love the most in the world wrong? Most people like to argue to win and not to learn. So am I attached to winning? Am I attached to being right? And am I trying to prove that I'm good? Like that I'm acceptable or good? You have no need, because we don't need to defend our righteousness. It's received. It's received from our Heavenly Father, not granted by another human being. The gospel frees you from the constant need to have to prove yourself, because all the approval that you will ever need is sitting at the right hand of God. C is, what am I trying to control? Somebody else's perception of me? Do I want to be seen as competent, as smart? I know that I have placed in my life a lot of emphasis on thinking that if I was smart, I would be acceptable or worthwhile. And so as a spiritual discipline for the course of the last year, I've tried to regularly practice the action of saying, I don't know. Because really the reality is I have a lot of opinions about everything, but I don't know everything. And my knee-jerk response oftentimes is if I say I don't know, then people will not find me worthy or competent or smart. That has been so freeing for me, to give myself permission to say I don't know and to realize that that says nothing about who I am or where I stand within my position in Christ. And then the last one is what do I think I'm entitled to? And the word is entitlement. Because sin is fundamentally antisocial, because it causes me to love me more than anything else and to care for me more than anyone else, I can feel really entitled to my way, to being understood, to a great big vat of expectations and assumptions. And so I need to check that and see what I think I'm entitled to, because it's going to show up in the way that I use my words with my spouse. I want a husband and kids fundamentally, when I'm not in the area of righteousness, who will just give me smooth sailing and think everything I do is right. I feel at times I can believe I'm entitled to that they won't question me, that they won't think that I have wrong intent. But it is wrong of me and prideful of me in order to make that assumption. I want to be less self-focused and self-oriented in that agenda, and I think we could all afford to ask that question of ourselves and do some self-examination along that line.
So one of the things I really love, Susan, about what you just said there is communication is not just about techniques. It's about who we are. So if we have these areas of character that we struggle with, whether it's entitlement, whether it's other areas, they come out in our communication. Sometimes I just want the tools to not fight or get along better, but communication is so much more than that. It's really about who we are. So if we have areas we take stuff really personal really quickly, or all these kind of areas we've kind of addressed, you can do the techniques for years and it really not completely help. I think what really Susan's talking about is our identity is in Christ, and who I am comes out in the way I communicate. But I think it's really hard for us. It's hard, I think, I've been around church circles a long time. I was told I was in a nursery at 4 days old, so I think we have a hard time asking ourselves the following question: how is my heart? Especially before God. Not if I'm even reading my Bible or going to church or being a nice person, but is my heart soft towards God? Am I teachable? Am I receptive? Am I putting my identity in other people's opinion of me? Do I have issues of jealousy? I struggle with contentment. All those things are issues of the heart, which will always come out eventually in how I perceive things and thus how I communicate. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up. You want to have one thing before we wrap it up, just because of time?
Yeah, just the two questions
Great.
I want to mention
Great.
on the communication filter.
Great.
Two things I'd like you after tonight, if you can practice along with me and Dan. Filter your words through these two questions. Who will witness my words? And will these words foster control or connection? And the only one I want to talk about for just a minute is who will witness my words. Remember the word Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus is always in the room. Years ago, I had the opportunity to meet President Reagan. And he's probably one of the most influential in a public sense people that I've ever met. Now, the way that I conducted myself with him was with the utmost respect. I was careful about the way I addressed him. I was careful about the way I addressed other people because I was in a room with him, and what he thought and the authority he carried, I thought mattered. Every single day in the conversations that you have with your spouse, with your kids, with your coworkers, there's someone of the utmost authority, not of the country, but of the universe in the room with you. Not there to kind of squat you down if you do a bad thing, but it's like he's going to be the witness to my words. And so I want us to filter the things that we say to people through that grid, and I think would all be better spoken if we did.
One practical way I try to do that for myself is sometimes if my wife, once a year my wife does something I don't like, or more than that actually, right? I'll try to think the following: I'm talking to someone indwelled by the Holy Spirit. I'm talking to someone that's indwelled by God. And God, please use that to slow me down, grow in my compassion, and realize it's not just talking to my wife, it's the Holy Spirit, God, who dwells within her.
Well, and you're talking to God's child.
Yeah.
Think about how we feel when someone, for those of us that have children, when someone addresses our children cruelly. You've never met a bigger mama bear in your life. Well, when you talk to your mate, you're talking to God's child too.
Absolutely.
You want to pay attention to that.
Well, thank you so much just for being here. Thanks. I know it's a lot to absorb. Just be careful what you learn. I'm always nervous that we not use this against our spouse. Like, oh, I learned more ways for you to grow. Let's pray for you more.
Yeah.
Right? So let me pray for us. The people that raised their hands at the beginning of the night, feel free to go up to them and say, hey, I want to hear your marriage story. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next week. So let me pray. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the Proverbs. Lord, I pray that we would be quick to ponder, even if we're hurt. Lord, I pray that we would be gracious because really you're gracious towards us. I pray for the marriages in here that feel stuck. I pray you would give them hope, give them the courage to face what might even be awkward or feel risky. And we love you. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you very much.